Guess what? Now we're recording. So now I can tell you that if you don't want to be on the recording, you can take your video off. Um, so, sorry. Okay, everyone is going to stay on mute. This is the same stuff we talk about every week, but there are some new people this week, so welcome. Everyone's going to stay on mute till question and answers, and then we'll let you unmute and ask your question of Roger. And or if you'd rather type it into the chat, you can do that, no problem. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you today Roger Shew, lecturer of geology at UNC Wilmington in the Department of Earth and Ocean Sciences and Environmental Science. Roger serves on several local committees and boards, all focused on sustainability and conservation. His goal is to combine teaching, research, and outreach for the benefit of our community. Roger, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and interests with us today. We can't wait to hear more about Ev-Henwood Preserve.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, all. Am I on okay?
You're great. I can hear you. Everything looks fabulous. All
right. Well, today I thought we would have a little brief look at Ev-Henwood Preserve. It's has quite a bit of different or variability in there. These are just a few of the pictures that illustrate some of that variability, everything from the bottomland hardwoods and Town Creek to the upland forest, some old field succession areas, as well as Longleaf pine restoration site. And one of the things that's important about this area is, number one, it's kind of operated or managed by UNC Wilmington, but also the Coastal Land Trust has 1/3 of the area with an easement, as I'll show you in a little bit. And of course, a couple of the things that we wanted to do with looking at Ev-Henwood is, number one, we want to preserve this very beautiful natural setting and preserve it for its ecosystem health. We want to reestablish a few of the historical things that are there, such as longleaf pines that were present historically in the area. And of course, one of the real benefits of this area is that it has a lot of educational and recreational opportunities for schools, the public, and everyone to come out and enjoy. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing today. Need to show you kind of where we're looking at. It's only about 25 minutes from Wilmington, so it's easy access going out of Wilmington down Highway 17 and coming down to the Town Creek area, the metropolis of Winnebago down here. And what you're seeing here in this orange outline in the star is the entrance to that area. So up in the upper right-hand side, what you can see is Rock Creek Road is the road that you go on to get down to that. And coming down through there, you will see that the area is located just off of Rock Creek Road through a road. It has a gate on it now because we don't have anyone there to allow access, but it's easy walking into it and numerous trails to see. So my goal today is to show you some of these beautiful different parts of Ev-Henwood, including the upland forest where we're planting longleaf pines, some of the old field succession, and of course getting on down to the Town Creek area. So what is it? It's 174 acres basically, and it's an area that is an historic farming site. It was used since the 1700s, as a matter of fact. And in this area, it was used historically as, say, for naval stores, but also for farming, cotton, corn, tobacco, and other. There's a lot of nature trails in the area, and it's also part of the North Carolina Coastal Birding Plain birding trail. We use this area for lots of different things, and lots of other people use it as well. In particular, it's a great remote lab for UNC Wilmington, but also for other schools. And I've had lots of different groups come out there, including Scouts, OLLI, the OSHA Lifelong Learning Group, the Native Plant Society, Audubon, Sierra Club, and lots of people from the community that just enjoy getting out and walking around. And by the way, for those of you who are interested, this is a great place to physically distance and getting out into nature without having to worry about too many people around you either. So lots of pluses for the area. Well, what we've got right now is show you a little map of the area. What's on the left there is the trail map that was put together years ago. And it shows all the trails. And by the way, there's a lot of trails out there. And following Hurricanes Matthew, Florence, and also a big ice storm that we had just all in the past 3 years, there are some trees that are down and some of the signage that's down. COVID has kind of knocked us out of doing a trail clearing area, but we have cleared most of the trails, but there are still a few large trees that are down across the trail. So when you go down, be careful of that, and hopefully within the next year, if we can get everything back online, we can get some of those removed. But basically what you see are a lot of trails in the area. But what we're doing right now is changing over to a new GIS-based map. We've got the map basically made, but we're going to be putting overlays on it. And then the ultimate goal with that is to also write a whole new booklet that outlines some of the summary information that's down at Ev-Henwood. So my plan today is to show you some of the variety that's there. And this kind of shows you the 4 different areas that we're looking at. Start down at the lower part. That's Town Creek, by the way. And the Bottomland hardwoods associated with Town Creek. So this is a nice lowland, wetland area. And then, of course, you go up from that low area, the wetland, into what I call the transition zone. This is a narrow zone moving from the bottomland hardwoods into the upland forest. And the upland forest used to be longleaf, but then it was into fields. And those farm fields have now changed over into a forest area of laurel oaks and loblolly pines. And one of the other things that's there is some old fields. There's about 10 acres of old fields that are still there, but they started growing up. And so we've been trying to restore those into the old field succession and also putting some of that into longleaf pine forest to try to replicate what we had years ago. So here's just a few of the plants that are in the area. A lot of people who's been down to Ev-Henwood know about Old Gus. The little brochure says it's named that because it's an humongous bald cypress. This is the bald cypress Taxodium disticum. These are not the pond cypress that you see in some of the other places. These are actually the bald cypress. There's loblolly pines. Whenever I first got back in 2000 into this area after working away for 20 years, there was one longleaf pine on the whole property down at Ev-Henwood, and we've tried to change that, but loblolly pines are the dominant species that are there. One of the ones that's one of my favorite trees is the American beech, and this isn't a common tree in our area. It occurs in certain places, and the places that this are some of the areas in that transition zone in particular, moving from the lowland to the upland area. American holly, red bay, laurel oak is a big species or number-wise in this area. And of course, we're moving into the oak hickory climax forest, and so you can find hickory down in that area too. So the 2 things we'd see down dominantly in the lowland area, like shown here with Town Creek, would be some of the black gum and also the cypress. In the transition zone, holly, American beech, and then as you go into the upper zone would have the loblolly pine and the laurel oak. And one of the things that a lot of people ask me about when they go down there, they see this weird looking stuff on the ground, particularly in some of the drier areas. Those are lichen fields. These are called reindeer lichens or reindeer moss, as a lot of people like to call them. It's really pretty. When it's wet outside, like it's been the past few days, it'd be nice and soft. And when it dries out, it'd be just crispy. That'll just break up in your hands. It's actually a combination of the blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, and fungi. So that's why it's a lichen. So it's a real interesting thing to see down in that area. So let's start looking at the area. So this is a picture, a Google image from June of last year. And one of the things that you see in this is everything looks kind of green. These are some of the old fields, as you see. And then you can see a little bit less dense vegetation in this area and a little bit more dense here. But if you go back 3 months, you can really see how the difference in that area is. This is the Bottomland hardwoods. That's Town Creek. You can see the floodplain very easily looking at that area. And then you move into the uplands up in here. So I think you can immediately see there's a difference in vegetation. And of course, there's a big difference in wetness and the soils that are associated with these areas. And since I'm a geologist, I always like to bring in the soils because that really does highlight some of the differences and why we see different plants and communities in different areas. And this is a picture showing you part of that area. This is, one of the fields. So just beyond that, at this blue star here, we have these kinds of soils. This is called an ultisol, which basically is just a really leach soil. It's usually reddish gray. And then over here in the red arrow, see this is down into the floodplain area. This is dark organic rich soils, and all an entisol is a soil that has no well-developed soil horizons in it. So these two are very different soils and very different plants. And so what we're going to do now is take a look down in this area first. So that's Town Creek, the Bottomland hardwoods. It's really pretty. Now, sometimes it's a much higher water level than that. In fact, it's much higher right now. But the area you can see, it's a nice little meandering creek. It's a blackwater stream, as we call it. And very wet conditions down in that area. And of course, all of you know, just got to get my sciencey stuff in there. The Wetlands SRC are defined by, 3 types of things: the soils, of course, the vegetation types, and the hydrology. And of course, the vegetation that we see down in these areas, such as old Gus is down in that area, the cypress and the gum, those are really obligate species. They're species that really occur most times in these wet areas. And then there's what we call facultative wet plants also that are 60 to 90% in wetter areas. So we use these 3 things to define when we have these wetland areas. So the other thing that's important about these areas, in addition to the plants and the soils, is the wildlife. And so over the years, I've put game cams down in there, and one of the faculty in environmental sciences does this as well. Put game cams in there to document some of the wildlife and some of the variety of things that we see. You might notice that the game cam is kind of low to the ground. Well, that's because that's where the animals are. So if you put it too high up in the thing, you won't get to see their eyeballs and bodies. You'll just see their feet. So in looking at this, this is why we've got those. And there's just a couple of images to show you what we have down in the area. There's 2 of our white-tailed deer, and of course the great blue heron that pose for my camera right there as well. There's also some other wildlife that's down there in the Bottomlands. There's a couple of pictures. That fella and lady up in the upper left there, that's Chancellor Sartorelli and his wife Kathy. I had the opportunity to take them down into these areas. I asked if they were wanting to go see them, and Kathy is really interested, and the Chancellor was happy to come along. I had to get him to spray his body though, because there are mosquitoes down there sometimes. But they're standing right there next to old Gus. And there's also some students We do lots of studies and work down there, not just classes, but research. This is a student, that monitored water for us down there over a period of time, and these are students looking at water as well as the plants that are down in these areas. It really is a great area to bring people to do studies for school. And it's not that far away, so it provides us with an opportunity to have a great remote classroom and lab area. And just to show you what those waters are, this is blackwater streams. As I said, the classification there is a CSW. And for those of you who want to know all about surface waters and things, DINA or DQ has the red book on surface waters and standards. And as you can see here, C is aquatic life, secondary recreation, fresh water. And the other thing that's really key is this SW, which is swamp waters. So these swamp waters, they are functioning at a lower dissolved oxygen and a slightly lower pH than other waters would. For instance, trout waters, you need to have a dissolved oxygen of 8 milligrams per liter. But this particular area, perch and bass work just fine in these kinds of waters as we have them there. So let's move out of the bottomlands and go up into this slightly drier area here. This is the transition zone. In fact, see these brown leaves here? That's on a beech tree. Beech trees are kind of unique in that they hold their leaves until the spring. They don't lose them in the wintertime. They hold them into the spring. And then when the new leaves start to pop out, they kind of push the old ones off, and we get the replacement of those. And here you can see some of the different trees that are in this area. Then you move slightly higher, and this is moving up. This is dominated by laurel oaks and also the loblolly pines, as you see in this area. Now, one of the things that's very important in this area is in the transition zone where the old fields were not really there. We've got a really mature stand of oaks and hickories. That's really the climax forest in this area. And I do a lot of work with longleaf pines, and those are what we call pyroclimax communities. So if you have fire repeatedly, like we do in many of the areas in southeastern North Carolina, you'll have what we might have as a dominant or climax community of longleaf pine and wiregrass. But if we don't have those fires, then oak hickory are the dominant climax species that we have for these areas. So let's just take a look at that area now. This is a couple of my different classes looking at the area. Here they're looking at the soils. They're seeing this is a Marvin soil in this area. So, and then they identify the different species that are associated with it. Over here, you can see a fellow looking up at this tree. What we're doing is we're getting diameter at breast height, DBH measurements on the trees. We're tying the age of those trees in with the height as well as the diameter at breast height. So how can I tell when this area used to be farmed? Well, we do tree cores. And so I've taken tree cores and multiple trees down in this area. So I get them to estimate, what they would be. And then we show them the tree core, and this particular tree is 82 years old. And so when you look at that, what you have in looking at those tree cores is you really get an opportunity to see, when this area, was once upon a time farmed. That uses our old idea of the old field succession story. And so one of the things that you see in the old field succession is the first thing that comes in, the grasses and the shrubs and the trees, et cetera, et cetera. I'll show you that in just a minute. By the way, just as an aside for showing you the American beech, one of the things I do for folks, and some of the folks on this talk may have been out there and participated in one of these with me, I do a modified kind of scavenger hunt where I set up sites. They have to find it with their GPS units, and once they get to that site, they have to identify, the water quality. Or when I did it for the Native Plant Society, I got them to identify all the plants that were in that area. It worked really well. Well, one of the sites I defined for that is this one, which is Rogers Tree. And that's an absolutely beautiful tree. It is the American beech, and you know, the bark on that thing is just absolutely amazing. One of the prettiest things that you can see. That's why it's called Rogers Tree anyway. So old field succession is something that we learned way back in ecology. My wife and I took ecology at UNCW, and I believe Paul Hosier's on the thing today, and he was my ecology professor at UNCW back a couple of years ago. And so what you can see with this whole thing is that, you know, there's a picture of the field. It's starting to transition from the plowed field into the grasses, and now the loblolly pines are starting to come into the area. And this picture that you see up on the upper left here, what you can see is this is kind of a successional stage. So here's my bare field. That's where we plant our tobacco or whatever. You let it go fallow and it changes into the grassland, into the grass shrub. So where were we with that guy who was looking at that tree a while ago? This is the area. So where we're at is over in this at 70 to 80 years old. As we move into the more mature areas, a lot of those pines will be lost and we'll move more into the oak hickory stage. And I think one of the really important things about this too is really looking at the productivity, the biomass, and also the number of species that we have associated with this kind of a scenario. And of course, one of the things we do out here too, since we talk a lot about climate now, you talk about trees and sequestration of carbon as well. So you can do all those calculations out here too. So you see that rapid net productivity, number of species that's going up. And then when you get over into this older time, you've lost some of the understory, and so you start losing some of the numbers of species. But one of the real keys in looking at all of these is, in the hierarchy of things, you look at the ground, you look at the subcanopy, and then the canopy to get all these different numbers of species that we have. And this is just a picture showing you some of the ideas of different species at these different stages as we have them. And this really was a picture from one of our game cams down right there near where that star was in the upland forest area. So structural and vertical and diversity within these areas is pretty dramatic. And that's one of the real benefits of having an area like Ev-Henwood as a study area, because it does have all that diversity. And of course, we have these game cams out just to show you a few more of the species that we have. This is a gray fox, by the way, not the red fox. Lots of opossums, raccoons. Probably the thing that we get a lot of, or more of anything else, is turkeys and deer. But we've captured coyote and many other species as well in the area. I'm still waiting to catch the bear and the bobcat, but we've captured other ones during all of these different ventures. And for education purposes, I like for my students to know what the different ones are. So sometimes you just see the tracks and trails of those different ones. So I want them to be able to interpret those too. So last thing to look at on the community side and looking at this succession, this is the fields. And this is how they were in 2000 to 2005 when I started going down there looking. And what you can see with these fields, they're starting to get into the pines. These are lots of sweet gums that are here. These are all loblollies as you see them. And of course, this is broom sedge, andropogon, and you can see all those different ones that you've got. One of the things we wanted to do was reestablish this area to see some of the old field succession, because it is a classic, educational tool, but it also provides a variation in the area for lots of different species to frequent as well. But in addition to having just the old field succession, we wanted to try and reestablish some of the longleafs down in this area, at least about 5 acres, because that was the common tree down here. And we know that because there's a huge tar kiln that's occurring on the property. In fact, one of the larger ones, I've seen lots of tar kilns in this area. We've got 2 on UNCW's campus and many down in the Green Swamp and other places. But as far as size-wise, this was or is one of the larger ones. So I get on my tractor and we cut out a few things. This is the same road that you see right here at a different time of year. You can see it has lots of different flowers, and so as you go through that sequence, you'll get a lot of different kinds of vegetation. The only thing is, if you let it go too far, it's going to get out of hand. You won't be able to manage that area, because once you get the hardwoods in or coming in, it's difficult to get the rooted system out. So one of the things that we did is go in and consider putting in some longleaf. Now here's one of the fields. Went in and mowed that area down. And then here you can see where we started putting in longleaf pines. One of the things we wanted to look at is establishing this small area of longleaf pines as it would be primarily for wildlife habitat. As you see up in the upper left, what you see, there's a density, significant density difference if you want to have, silviculture, which is forestry for economics, timber or straw. You have lots of trees per acre, 500 plus, give or take. If you want to have for wildlife, though, because you want to have that understory, the herbaceous layer down below, then you might only put 250 to 350 trees in those areas. So our goal was to put around 300, give or take. And so we put in a kind of a spacing, if you will, as this. So I just calculated this so my students could see this. And so we went down to, put in some of these trees. By the way, this is the map, and this is where the tar kiln is in the map. And for those of you who don't know what a tar kiln is, there's a fantastic display up in Bladen Lakes, up near Jones Lake. It's called Turnbull State Forest area. And they've got a working demonstration, more or less, of what Naval Store's operations were in southeastern North Carolina. This is a picture, in fact, from that area. What this shows you is an excavated site. You dig a trench around. You've got pile your stumps and logs and things in here. You take this soil, pile it on top, and then you set this on fire below that soil so it burns very slowly. So it doesn't burn the resin, it makes the resin ooze out of the tree or the roots and stuff, and then you can get the resin actually coming out and going into a little area right here that might be a little barrel that you would put. And by the way, I can show you those on UNCW's campus or the Green Swamp or lots of different places if you're interested. This is what one would look like in operations, an old plate showing that. So there's the guys collecting the resin. And of course, as you all know, Naval Stores was the big thing along with rice back in the early 1800s. And in fact, you all know about the Tar Heel story, I'm sure, that came from this. Wilmington was the Naval Stores capital for export in the entire world before the Civil War. So planting the trees. There was one of my classes in 2012 was when we first started this. We put the trees in. I got the trees from the Forest Service up at Goldsboro. They have the tree plantation up there where they grow all these seedlings. Box has 300. So that first year we put in 600 trees, and these are called Dibble bars. It's a tool for helping to drive a hole into the ground and being able to plant them. And this is one of the students actually planting those trees at that time. So I want to show you a sequence of pictures very fast because I know we have a limited amount of time. This is 2 years later. This is May of 2014. And this white arrow is going to be on the same tree as I go through it. There's 2015 in May. You can see that same tree. There's 2017. By the way, we went back and put in some new trees. So I've got another arrow starting now to fill in some of the spaces. So this is 12/2017. And then this is in 2019. This is 3 weeks after a controlled burn. I'd been trying to get a burn down there for several years, and we finally got it in March of, or actually it was end of February of 2019. You might notice that the trees look like they're burned, but longleaf pines, because of where they are with a thicker bark and also a protected apical bud, those particular trees do very well unless it's a wildfire. That's why we want to have a control burn and not a wildfire burn. And just to show you then, this is this year. This is in June of this year. You can see the trees were not damaged. You can see also that the trees have grown up even more. But one of the things you might notice, these are sweet gums. You hear me okay still? So these are sweet gums in this area. And so one of the things that you see in this area is we'll have to make sure and take those out. That's the purpose of a controlled burn. We also wanted to plant another area as well. Here you can see we're planting a slightly different area, putting in wiregrass as well as longleaf pines. This is a unique style that this student was using to do planting. I think they're going to jump on it and drive it into the ground. But here you can see we're putting it in this other area. This is in a slightly lower area than what we were doing in the other site. Well, things happen. We had a little incident in 2018 associated with Hurricane Florence. And Hurricane Florence caused quite a bit of destruction, as we all know. This is Highway 17. That is where Town Creek is, right there. Town Creek went from something that you could easily throw a rock across to something that was over a half-mile wide. And by the way, that water level, as you see it on that road, that makes that about 20 feet higher than what the actual creek level is usually. What that ended up doing was, since Town Creek is over here, Town Creek, the headwaters of Town Creek is right on the Ev-Henwood property. Well, that obviously rose and flooded this entire field area. And unfortunately, here's the trees that those people in the previous slide were planting 3 years earlier. They had gotten up to be 4 to 6 feet tall. And what happened was the floodwaters were so high, they inundated this area for a week with floodwaters that covered those entire trees. You might notice that these two longleaf pines, which are higher, actually survived. These stood underwater down here for that 5 to 6 days. And so a lot of people said, well, why would you go back and plant things? Well, it turns out that Hurricane Matthew, if you look in this picture, this was done in February of 2015. Hurricane Matthew came along in 2016, and even though it flooded this area, it didn't stand as long as Hurricane Florence waters did. So we thought that it's probably a good thing to go ahead and let's see about reestablishing. So that's what we're doing in this picture for this area. So we're replanting wiregrass and longleaf pines for that area, and hopefully can reestablish those once again. So just to summarize some of the things that we're doing in this area, I hope I've shown you some of the variety that you've got. We really want to maintain this area in some of the natural condition as possible. The diversity that we've had has multiple educational opportunities for folks as well as the recreational things. We do monitor and manage the area. There's certainly some damages that occur, and there's some things for us to do. There's always volunteer opportunities that we'd like to have our students do, and other folks have come down and helped us as well. We're trying to restore a little bit of a longleaf pine ecosystem in the area, maintain some of the old fields for successional studies. We're doing some inventory work on the plants and animals now. This was done in a limited fashion years ago, but we want to continue doing that. We're doing a new work with our GIS and write-ups on these areas so that we can incorporate that and put new information on our website that will be housed at UNCW. So those are just a few of the images and pictures of the site. I think it's a really precious site for us at UNCW and for the community. I think it's a really valuable piece to maintain for lots of different reasons, and mainly just as a natural area. In one of the areas that is growing the fastest in all of North Carolina, Brunswick County is the fastest growing county in the state. Leland is the fastest growing city now in the state. So having this little refugia area in an area that is growing so rapidly really becomes important for us to have. And I hope that all of you will take the opportunity to go down and take a look at it. So with that, I guess I'll close and see if there might be any questions.
I have a question. This is Mike Ryan.
Yes.
And that is, can we go down there unescorted? Or do we need to make an appointment or have a guide or what?
Mike, thanks for asking that question. You do not have to have a guide or you do not have to contact anyone. There's a parking area that's right there at the entrance. It's, as I said, gated, but there's a nice path that goes from there down into the area. So you're welcome anytime. We obviously like for it to be, during the daytime. And we do discourage any animals, horses, dogs, no campfires, no collecting or anything like that. It is a preserve after all, but we certainly encourage folks to come down at their leisure. I like to go down, quite a bit. This time of year, it's a little bit more yellow flies, although they're on the decline now, and mosquitoes, but each part of the year gives you a different opportunity to see something different as well. So I encourage you to go down.
And grandchildren are welcome, right?
Absolutely. More kids, the merrier to get them into nature. Can't get any better than that.
Thank you, Roger.
Hey, Roger, this is Stuart Barrett. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
So the ecological value of the preserve is phenomenal, and of course, it as you well demonstrated, it has a really important value for the university on the educational component. I'm wondering if you have just a guesstimate of the number of students who have visited the preserve in the last year or 5 years. Do you have that off the top of your head?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can give you a fair estimate.
Perfect.
I try to keep tabs on this, and it's not a great job or effective, but I do try to get people to tell me when they're going down. And, folks in environmental sciences, EOS, biology have all gone down there and had classes. And so there's at least 5 different classes that go down there each semester for various reasons. Some of them going on repeated basis because they're doing repeated studies during that semester. There's also at least 1, if not 2 different groups that go down to do training for different things. I've had the Army Corps of Engineers, as a matter of fact, want to go down and do invertebrate studies on the stream, so they can see the health of the stream based on the invertebrate population that's there. So there's lots of activity and emphasis for folks. And I want to highlight that there's a whole swath of community members that go down there as well. I've had several that have come on our cleanups, and also that I've met down there just walking around, and they're always interested in talking about some of the area. So I have tabbed, as far as legitimate numbers, over 200 on the educational side during an individual semester for doing work. One of the things I will highlight, though, that we need to do is there are sometimes, folks, don't do the right thing, and they will mistreat our areas, our preserves. You know, going down, there's some houses and things in there that we're looking to try and demolish, remove because of, you know, health hazards, and also folks like to go down and play around with those. So just to let you know, we have ongoing things to try to make sure that we have a preserve that's, you know, useful, viable, and totally intact for everyone to enjoy. And by the way, that's one of the things that you know, we need to continue working with Coastal Land Trust on, because in that shared areas where most of those buildings are.
Roger, we've got a question here on the chat. Lily wants to know if there's a new updated trail map, or is that still in the works?
Hello, Lily, and glad you're still around. Lily was one of the ones that came down and helped organize one of our cleanups and doing some planting of work. I love AmeriCorps, it's great work. So Lily, it got kind of sidetracked because of all the things that's gone on, but it's still in the process, and we're hoping that that will be done if we can all get back together and working, you know, this year, or certainly by the springtime.
Very good. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Well, Roger, thank you so much. This is really great. My family went to Ev-Henwood ages ago. I'm now very excited to go back and see all that is going on there. That is just such a cool story. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and thanks for everybody tuning in, and hope you can take the time to get out and enjoy some stuff. Even when it's hot, it's still pretty nice.
Nice. Yeah, I hope a lot of us on this call can make it out there. The parking might get a little crowded.
Well, if you want to go down sometime and have a walk around with someone who knows just a little bit about it, not a lot, but a little bit, I'd be happy to go.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for everyone who's attending today as well. I just want to let you know that we have Little Lunch lectures scheduled through August the 7th. The next two are Lindsay Addison from North Carolina Audubon, and she will be talking about nesting water birds of eastern North Carolina. And then on the 24th of July, Lloyd Singleton from the New Hanover County Extension, and otherwise known as the Arboretum here in Wilmington, he will be talking about the Coastal Landscapes Initiative. And if you've ever wondered what native plants that you should be planting in your yard, you should definitely make it to that one, because it's a really cool educational opportunity to kind of learn about more native plants. One last announcement is our annual celebration will be virtual this year, and it will be on September the 26th. So if you want to mark your calendar that far in advance, go ahead. But there will be lots more information coming about that. So with that said, I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend. See you back here next Friday for Little Lunch Lecture, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
Awesome.